Hello, my name is Donald Douglas, and I'm the committee chair for the Douglas County Association for Gifted Children. You're about to see a presentation that was shared on January 27th, 2025 with the Gifted Association. I'm going to just talk through these slides that you see here, so it may not be a totally smooth and polished presentation, but I want to at least get the information to you in a timely manner so those who didn't make the meeting or want to see some more information can see that here. The topic for the evening was considerations for parents of gifted children as their students move from elementary school to middle school and approach high school choice. Here in Douglas County, you do have a choice of what high school you go to. For middle school and elementary school both, you pretty much go where you're zoned, but once you reach high school, you do have a choice. So the things that go into making that choice are different depending on each person. One thing may be more important for your consideration that's not as important for somebody else. But what we're looking at here are a few of what could be considered common considerations. So here's some decision-making factors. Where do you live? That is going to come into play, of course, in elementary and middle school most strongly because you will go for where you are zoned, with a few exceptions. How is your districted elementary, middle, or high school doing? So this encompasses not just test scores, but also things like the general school environment. Is it a safe school for your students? Is it a place where you think they'll get the best, well-rounded education? So these are things to consider when you're looking at how your school is doing. Also, you do have to consider how your student is doing, not only academically, but in other areas of their life as well. One school may fit your student better than another school. Other things to consider are whether or not your student has a school preference. This specifically applies to high schools. Also, where are their friends going? Even though you don't want this to be a main factor, it is a factor. Your child can have a bad experience if they're separated from their friends. And also, can you get your student to and from the school you want them to go to? And this especially does apply to high school. If you're getting a school that's out of your zone and you didn't necessarily make it into that school, but you want to go there. I've looked at a lot of different factors myself as it came time for my kids to go to different levels of schools. And to tell you the truth, I have moved them around some. That's just a decision that you as a parent get to make. And one parent's decisions may differ from someone else's. One factor for you that may be more important may not matter for another one. I have a friend who removed their child from a school that one of my students was in, and I felt like the school was fine, but for them, they did not like the environment. So different things may affect you differently. Let's first look at where you live and how that plays into what school you go to. So if you go to the county website for Douglas County and you go into the menu, you will see a section called Who We Are. And under that section, under that menu item, you'll see district maps. And these maps basically will show you where you are zoned as far as what schools you'll go to. So they're not 100% precise maps, but you get the general idea of what schools you'll be going to based on where you live. This is the elementary school map. This is the middle school map, and this is the high school map. One thing you'll notice on these maps sometimes is sometimes there are some zigzags that happen where a certain neighborhood is included or excluded, and that is a part of the zoning process for better or for worse. We're going to look at the schools, but we're going to take a quick detour from that because what I do want to look at are some other parent resources that are great for you to have. One thing I do want to note before we go any further is I've had some questions about middle school and the transition from elementary to middle school. So number one, there isn't a pull-out program once your student does reach middle school. So in elementary school in Douglas County, most of the schools pretty much have a pull-out program where your student, if they're in the gifted program, has a whole day where they spend time with a gifted teacher and are able to get a different level of teaching and a different type of teaching. This doesn't happen in the middle school. They are merged with other high-achieving students, but they're not strictly gifted students that they're with. Also, the transition from elementary school to middle school is a pretty hard cut. I know when it happened for me that I was just kind of a little shocked that, my child had gone from kind of a school where there was a lot of attention given to them, and not so much attention, but just you were well informed about what was happening with your student. You got communication from the teachers and you had teacher meetings and things like this. Once you're at middle school, teacher meetings pretty much don't exist unless your student's not performing well for the most part. And so a lot of these things are going to change for you, and it's just good to know that ahead of time. You kind of feel like you need a roadmap for that, but from my personal experience, it's pretty much a pretty hard cut from elementary to middle school, and your child just kind of starts doing things on their own. Under the resources, under parent resources in particular, there's academic and instructional resources, and in this area, you'll see a career planner. So this is my little detour. The career planner, this applies to high schools, is a very good document. The one here online is not 100% up to date. It's for 2022 to 2023. But most of the information in here I feel like is still relevant. And what this planner does is it helps you to navigate the journey from 8th grade to high school. This first little section here just kind of lets you know what to do to prepare for that journey. But then we also get into the different high schools and other programs that the county offers and exactly what each high school has, what type of high school they are. You see Alexander here is a liberal arts college prep, AP Capstone School, Chapel Hill, an AP Magnet program. Douglas County has the IB program. That's the only school that has IB in Douglas County. Lithia Springs STEM, New Manchester FAME program, that's fine arts. And then the College and Career Institute, of course, a dual enrollment effort with West Georgia Tech College. And so all these different things are outlined here in that document. But better than that, there is within this document, there is some great information that helps you know what particular pathways map best to the different schools. So here there's a school key system, and in this system you can kind of see there's different colors for each school, and it lets you know if these classes or programs or clubs or whatever are offered at these schools just based on the color it shows when it talks about that program. And also if there's a square, same color as the school, but if there's a square instead of a circle, that lets you know that this is actually an industry certified class. And so that's some great information to have. So as you look through here, you can kind of see how this works. Different organizations and classes, even electives, you see how the colors go out. Many of the schools all have the same thing, but there's some of them that are specific. Like for instance, Lithia Springs is a STEM school, so they're one of the ones that has the first robotics program, one of the few that has that. And also at the end of this document, there are some more information on the different programs for these schools. The magnet schools, for FAME and for IB and STEM and other things. So in those sections, it kind of has more details. It actually talks about the classes that are offered there. And I find this to be very, very good information on these different schools. As well, if you look under some of these pathways, it does show you, you see the blue dot at the top of this diagram, and that lets you know that this particular one is offered just at that one place. I think this is the College Career Institute where this is offered. And then health and medicine pathway, this is offered at several different schools. So a great document. I encourage you to go there under the parent resources and find this document, download it, and use it. Use it to even have a conversation with your children. So back to the schools. If we go into the schools, and here we're going to first kind of look at the high school, also the middle school a little bit. But here, if you will see that there are different fact sheets on the schools. Now on the county website right now, this could change at any moment, of course, but right now there's fact sheets for all 5 schools that are available, but only 3 of them are shown on the website for the county. So Chapel Hill and Douglas County, these 2 schools do not have a fact sheet that's available from the county website. If you go to their websites, you do see those fact sheets there. The ones also that are here, as you can see, they're 2023 to 2024 for both Alexander and Lithia Springs, but New Manchester's one on the county website is a very old one. Actually doesn't have the proper principal, and the other information is no longer current. So here's pretty much what the fact sheets look like. They have a message from the principal. They have some different things about the enrollment and other numbers like that. This is just a quick snapshot from a couple of different ones. And each school does have a fact sheet. So for the ones that don't have it on the county website, like Chapel Hill High School, if you go to their website, you look under this, on the bottom right, this Chapel Hill High School fact sheet. That's where you're going to find it for this school. And this is an updated one for that high school. It's for 2024-25, so more recent than the ones that were even on the county website. Also, same thing for Douglas County High School. They have a fact sheet, and this one as well will show all the same information that some of the other ones did. So all the schools, again, do have, under different areas, like here for Alexander, you see it's under the school profile, so it's a little bit of a different name, but that's where you go to find, again, that fact sheet. For Lithia Springs, it is under About section and fact sheet, and for New Manchester, you find it under Our School and New Manchester High School facts. And if you look at their sheet, actually, they do have an updated one current for this year as well, with the proper principal and other information. So those are some quick little snapshots you can get of the schools. You kind of see the same thing for the middle schools as well. The county does have all 8 middle schools listed, and it has both the website and the school profile fact sheets that are there. So you can get a little more information on the middle schools from there. And here's just a look. You can see that most of these are not 100% up to date. And you'd have to look through at the individual middle schools to see whether or not they have a more updated version. I did look at a couple, and a couple were slightly different, but they weren't 100% up to date for this current year. All right, and here's one, Chapel Hill Middle School. Again, for any of these, you just go to the middle school, go to the school, go to the website, and go to different sections. Here it's called School Profile, and that's where you're going to find this fact sheet once again. All right. So the next question is, how is my school doing? So some parts of this you're not going to find online. Some parts of it can only come from a conversation with another parent who's had a student there, a conversation like we actually did on this meeting night where we broke apart in different groups and talked through things. So some things like school safety. All schools are going to pretty much say that they're a safe school for the most part, but you're not going to see any hard stats on how many fights might have happened this month or this year or whatever else, or even this day. You're not going to see those kind of things online. So this is where you have to have conversations with other parents and even with school administrators. Usually a school administrator isn't going to necessarily share everything, because there's certain things they can and can't share, or do or don't want to share, rather, usually. But if you have a good relationship, you can get some good information on the schools that you are looking at. So, how's your school doing? Again, there are some information, some parts of the information that you can get from the website. And so academic and instructional resources, again, you can go here, and GMAS, the Georgia Milestones Testing. There's a link here that'll get you to that section. So I pulled a little bit of information here, and I shared this on the meeting night. Highlighted in yellow are the high schools. And this particular slide is showing algebra, the concepts and connections, and how the testing went on that. So you'll notice on this slide a couple things. Number one, that there also are middle schools included here. So middle school students, depending on how they were positioned when they left elementary school, have an opportunity to take algebra in middle school. The way it worked for my son, and I think the program was slightly changed, but the way it worked for him was they took a year and a half in their 6th grade year of math, a year and a half in their 7th grade year of math, and then that last year they took algebra. So as I mentioned, the program is slightly changed, I believe, but in any case, in middle school, if your student has performed well, they are able to take algebra. So I say this also to encourage you to not overlook any part of your student's education. So what they do in elementary school, especially that 5th grade year is going to determine how they're placed in middle school. So don't just say, well, whatever, we'll start worrying about them when they get to high school or whatever. No, you need to be concerned and keep an eye on their grades, especially that 5th grade year, because that will position them well for their middle school experience and going into high school. If they take algebra in middle school, then guess what? In high school, they'll be able to start with geometry and be able to move from there. On this chart, you see, again, in the yellow, the high schools and how they performed. You can notice that the high schools, by and large, have a large chunk of the students under the beginning learner category in algebra. And distinguished learner, the numbers are pretty low. If you look at the middle schools, these again are some of the very smart students, gifted and other advanced students. And they are typically doing very well in algebra. So again, this chart is covering the same testing for algebra. One level is high school, one level is middle school, but they're both in algebra classes. And so one thing you can use numbers like this for is you can look and say, okay, well, let's look at Chapel Hill Middle School. There's 81% of their students are distinguished learners. So when they're leaving from that, what kind of concepts and at what pace are these concepts being taught when they get to the next level in high school? Because if in high school, let's say, for example, they go to Alexander, the chart here is showing that they have 50% beginning learners taking algebra. So those same students are going to be taking the next level, which may be geometry. And so if you have a geometry class that has a lot of beginning learners, and also you have some very strong distinguished learners getting into that same geometry class, depending on the numbers, that class may be more prone to a slower pace than your student is used to. So that's a conversation I would have with the high schools, looking at these stats and just say, hey, am I reading this wrong? Or what's going to happen when my student gets to the next level after algebra. When they get to geometry, what's that going to look like? So that's a good way just to use numbers that you get. So there's no one thing that I look at that controls every single bit of my decision when it comes to schools. But some things outweigh others, and for you it may be something different. One thing I think that could maybe be a singular thing that you would look at might be school safety. I mean, I don't care if it's a great school or a terrible school. If my kid's not safe, they're not going to go to that school. So that's algebra concepts and connections from GMAS information. So that again is just one bit of information from testing. I did break this into just the middle school, so you could see that. I didn't do this during the meeting on the 27th of January, but I did want to just kind of break these out here. So for the middle school students, you can kind of see Chapel Hill Middle is on the top. Below them is Mason Creek Fairplay and the other schools. There's a pretty significant drop once you get past Fairplay, these top three schools. As far as the distinguished learners, it drops almost to half, 28%. And so just things to be aware of when you're even looking at middle schools is, hey, what's happening here to drive these numbers? And do I need to be concerned, or is this just a number, so to speak? I also have a little chart here below that just kind of shows how many students were tested and what percentage of the overall students that represent. So these percentages aren't too far off, but you can see that even though there's 42 at Chapel Hill Middle School, they got a lot more students. And so that actually is a smaller percentage of students than, say, at Fairplay Middle School, where there's only 20 students. That's a slightly higher percentage of students. Now, Mason Creek Middle does have the highest, but again, that's just things to note on the numbers. So don't just look at the number of people tested and be like, oh, they got more smart students at these schools. Well, look at the percentages, look at the overall students. You have to know how that works out. All right, next, another look at some of the test scores for the districts and the schools. Here from the county website under Who We Are, you'll see a link that gets you basically to the state website. We already looked at GMAS, but also want to look at some of the college and career readiness scores. So you can get those here through the state website if you look under What We Do, and there's testing and things like that, performance. If you click on this image here, it's going to open up the reports, and here you can basically put in your county, and here we put in Douglas County. And what you see is that there's these 5 different categories: content mastery, progress, closing gaps, readiness, and graduation rate, that they use on the CCRPI, the College and Career Readiness Performance Index. They use these 5 different categories to kind of score the schools. So this is Douglas County pulled up here, and we're going to only focus really on content mastery because we didn't have a lot of time when we were looking at this, and you could be buried in stats forever. So content mastery is what we're going to look at. So 57.6 is the score on content mastery. Now you do have to remember this is on a scale of 100. So 57.6 is just what it looks like in that percentage scale. Not terribly high for content mastery. But again, these are going to allow you to ask some questions later on. And you can kind of see the different categories and what the scores were for those. If your only criteria for a high school, for instance, is do the kids graduate, I mean, most of the high schools that your kid's going to graduate, okay, that's not really a big deal if that's your only criteria. But if you want to look deeper at some of the other things, then that's what we're going to do here a little bit. So content mastery, again, we said 57.6 for the high school students. That's where they are rating. The state high school students, 68.2, so we're more than 10 points below that level. So these are just some of the categories: American Lit, Algebra, Biology, U.S. History. You can kind of see again where the high schoolers rated. So these are the schools and how they rated. Alexander's at the top with 60, Lithia Springs at the bottom with 50. But again, these are on a scale of 100, so either 50 or 60. This isn't a giant spread on content mastery, so you're not going to just see a massive difference between the schools as far as this category of content mastery. Now, sometimes you look at numbers like this and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, it's 60% or whatever, but I mean, is that kind of a regular score? Sometimes these numbers, you can't really ever get 100%, you know. Well, what I decided to do was just to check out another county, a county that's kind of attached to Douglas County on one part anyhow, and that's Cobb County. So in Cobb County, the content mastery for high schoolers was 83.3. Now, that's much higher than the number in the 50s that we had in Douglas County. So that's their overall number for all of the schools in Cobb County. And if you kind of do a little bit of a dive into the schools, you'll see there that they actually had several schools that are at 100 as far as their content mastery scores. And so this lets you know that, yes, those numbers are attainable. It's not just kind of fake numbers or whatever, but There's several schools that get, very high numbers for content mastery. And if you kind of look at how these fall out, pretty much just the bottom section of Cobb County, that's kind of where our county picks up. So I'm not saying this to scare you into another county or anything like that, but I'm just letting you know that, hey, there are higher scores that can be reached and that are being reached in different areas by different schools. As you look here at this particular school, Lassiter High School, you can see under content mastery, they had 100 plus for all these categories. 100, you actually can't get more than 100 as a content mastery for these scores that go into it. So that's what it says when it has this 100 plus. I kind of had to look that up. How's it plus 100? But yeah, you can score higher. So again, just looking at some different things. I kind of skipped over some of these slides during the actual presentation, but what I also had done, you got the breakout of who's beginning, developing, proficient, distinguished, even by student type, by student groups, you can see these different things and how they break out. And so again, in Lassiter, you see that, by and large, there's not many students at all under beginning learner. And this even carries down, this breaks some stereotypes, carries down to economically disadvantaged, students with disability, all the different, student groups. They're all low in this beginning learner one, and most of them are pretty high up here in the distinguished learner. And so, again, sometimes you might think, well, it's because they're a this or they're that, that's why they score so high or whatever else. Well, it's a little bit of a different story, actually, when you look at it. And it's not just driven by economics either. Here in Douglas County, the high school we have is Alexander. And here you see we're all in double digits, all the different student groups. Students with disability are at 54%, whereas in Cobb County, not the same students, but students with disability, that same category, they're at 17%. So again, don't look at some category and just say, well, it's because they are in this category, that's why they're scoring that percentage. Looking between these, you can see that that's not the case. That category itself does not determine how they do on the testing. Okay, so the middle schools, I also wanted to slide some information in here about them. I didn't do this during the presentation, but I was asked some questions about it. So middle schools, content mastery, 56.2, so that's about the same score as the high school. And when you look a little further down at the schools, you see leading it is Mason Creek Middle School, but they're at 70. And it goes down pretty much to a 41. So a much larger spread among the middle schools, especially once you pass these first 3 or 4 Brighton Academy. There's not always stats for Brighton Academy, but once you pass those first 4, there's a pretty big drop, and then it kind of continues to drop there a little bit. Again, looking at another county, we look at Cobb County, and we see that under content mastery, they're much higher, 75.9, so that's like 20 points higher. And again, looking at their schools, they have a pretty good number of schools up here in the high 90s. And not until you get to the second page do you start seeing some that are kind of getting the scores that we had. So that's pretty much the halfway mark right here. And that's where we as a county are picking up right there. So again, just letting you see that there's different things happening in different counties and that higher numbers are attainable. So this is Douglas County elementary schools. I threw this slide in here as well. We didn't see this at the meeting, but this is kind of letting you know where the elementary schools do with their content mastery. And this is just a quick slide, again, showing that we do have a pretty high school here at South Douglas at 84, and then it jumps down to 77 and kind of keeps on working its way down. But that's a pretty good score there at South Douglas for the elementary level. Again, going to Cobb County, we can see that, well, you can do better. There are 100% on several of their schools, 99.9. So again, differences across counties, differences across schools. These are just numbers that I'm showing you. And again, just to let you know that these numbers, they are real numbers on a scale of 0 to 100. So the next question is, how is your student doing? And again, this isn't just about their academics. So if you go to Parent Portal, that's going to show you their academics. But beyond Parent Portal, a bigger part of how your student is doing, and again, this is just a slide showing you how you get into Parent Portal. But beyond those things, you have to know, how is your student doing emotionally in school? What will another school maybe offer for them? I talked to a parent in the meeting, and they said they had to remove their student from a school, that they were at a high-performing school, but they had to remove their student because they felt like they were being marginalized, and it was affecting them actually emotionally, mentally, to the point to where withdrawal was the only option for this parent. So people do look at different things at school, so don't only look at the academics. You have to look at the entire school environment. And, you know, you may look at things like what student groups are there, and what's the environment as far as safety and everything else, all these come into the picture, and everyone has a different thing that's important to them. But the most important thing is doing what is best for your student when it comes to these. Now, after this presentation, there's something I can't capture, and that is our table talk. So what we did was we broke into different groups and we talked about the schools, just parent to parent, and kind of shared what you knew about the schools that you're in, the schools that you may be going to. And again, I'm a parent for kids in the school system, and I chose to keep my kids in Douglas County, and they've been doing great. My son is finished. He's a freshman in college. He was straight A's all through school, was accepted at Georgia Tech. And now he's at the Dental College of Georgia in Augusta is where he chose to go. And so I say that just to let you know that in Douglas County, there's plenty of good going on, despite what some of the scores may show. And the most important factor, and hopefully you've made it this far to hear this, but the most important factor for your students is what's happening at home. What kind of expectations do you have of your students, of your children? What are your expectations? Because that's really what drives how well they're going to perform in school. My son was at, again, not a very high-performing school, as I already mentioned, but I left him there because I knew that there was some good nurturing going on at that school, and at a young age, nurturing is important for the kids. It's not just all about numbers, and so I felt that was the best place for him. And so again, just have a holistic approach when you're looking at the schools that you'll be sending your children to as they move along in the process. So that's it for the presentation. You can reach me through Remind if you're connected, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you have or get you to someone that can answer the questions for you. Thank you very much.